Welcome to MacStories Unwind, a weekly review of everything MacStories and more. I'm John Voorhees, and with me, of course, is Federico Viticci. Hey, Federico.
Hello, John. How are you?
I'm doing just fine. You know, we're here in the middle of August, kind of building up towards the big review season in the fall of both, of course, the OS reviews, but also all the apps that come out. And I've found I've been pleasantly surprised, and I guess more busy than I expected, because there have been, you know, I think with everybody stuck at home, we've seen an awful lot of apps coming out this August. I mean, usually August is very quiet, but we've had a lot more going on, a lot more interesting apps than we normally have to cover, which is kind of fun.
It is fun. There's a lot of things happening between these App Store releases, and developers are starting to send us betas, like test flight betas for their iOS and iPadOS 14 updates. So that backlog is definitely building up, at least on my iPhone and iPad, and I'm thankful for the app library on my phone, because all of those apps are ending up there instead of my home screen. But the app library is not on the iPad, which makes me sad.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Well, let's dig into some of these apps that we've been covering this past week. And the first one that I want to mention is GameTrack, because GameTrack's an app that we have mentioned on the club before, but I don't think you or I or Ryan have written about it on MacStories in the past. And what it is it's a database app for tracking the games that you want to play. So it's everything. It uses the IGDB database to pull in metadata about Xbox and PlayStation and Switch and all those consoles, and PC and all the older generation consoles into the database, and you can divide it up into lists of games that you're currently playing, games that are coming out in the future that you want to play that are on a wish list, and an archive of games you've completed or abandoned or whatever. So you can, by default, it kind of breaks down into those three categories. And then if you're a subscriber, you can also add new lists. And with this update, you can add ranked lists, which I think are kind of cool, because you can say, this is Federico's top 10 Switch games, your absolute favorite. Or you can rank all of the Pokemon games from 1 to, I don't know what it would be, 25, however many there happen to be. And that's a lot of fun. Another thing that's changed with this iteration of the app is that there's an activity feed, which is kind of a little bit of a social network. If you go to your activity feed, you'll see all the games that you've added to your lists. It's kind of a chronology, a log of your activity in the app, which syncs across all of your devices, and you can follow other people that use the app. And then when you go into your activity feed, not only will you see what you've done, which you already know, of course, but you'll see what your friends are doing, which I like a lot. It's a really cool app in that way. And what I like particularly about this is that it's made just for games. So, it has that aesthetic and that all that data that you want to track, including allowing you to do things like take notes on games. Like if there's a game you're going to be putting down for a few weeks because you're busy, you might want to leave yourself a note as to where you're picking up and what you want to do. You can rate everything. You can put the percent completion of each game in there. It's just a whole lot of things you can do. Plus, you can share games with other people. One thing you can't do, which I really hope gets added in the future, is you can't share your lists, because I'd really like to both be able to share lists with other people. Like say, here are my 5 favorite Switch games, and send that to you or somebody else. But I'd also like to have collaborative lists. Like I think it could be really cool, and I've always thought this would be kind of fun if there was an app for apps like this, where it could be like, here is kind of a collaborative list of the MacStories team of the 10 favorite text editors or something like that. But that would be neat to have for the game as well, for GameTrack as well. It's both on the iPhone and the iPad. I think it works better on the iPhone. It's got a really nice card-style modern UI for that. On the iPad, when you kind of lay that all out and stretch it all out, it doesn't work as well, I don't think. But I've seen that the developer on Twitter posting screenshots that he's working on something for iOS 14 that uses the sidebar, which I think just from the few screenshots I've seen looks better from a design standpoint for the iPad. So I'm looking forward to that coming out. But yeah, it's a great game, and I've used it in the past, kind of abandoned it for a while where I was trying to consolidate a lot of this tracking stuff, but then realized I really like to have a dedicated app for this sort of thing. And so now I'm back using GameTrack and loading it up with all the games I'm currently playing or want to play in the future.
Very nice. Very nice. I should check it out again and try and build my backlog again in there. Also on the website this week, Ryan reviewed this new utility it's literally called the Wallpaper app, which is this new app for iPhone and iPad, which, as the name implies, it lets you save wallpapers for your devices. However, there's a twist here in that these wallpapers, well, the best way that I can put it is these wallpapers don't suck. By that I mean, like, usually when you go on the web and you search for like iPad wallpapers, you run across these questionable websites filled with ads, and the images that you download, like, they don't have any attribution. And these wallpapers, they're not properly sized. Some of them are blurry, and some of them have like watermarks on them. And they're not really designed to work well with icons on top of them, or with widgets now in iOS and iPadOS 14. Whereas the Wallpaper app does a few interesting things. All the wallpapers are, sort of these abstract, color-based wallpapers that really work well with icons, with colorful icons or widgets on top of them, or notifications if you want to use it on the lock screen. These are sort of these abstract shapes and curves and like solid shapes blending like with these lines and stripes. They're really nicely done. If you like abstract, colorful wallpapers, this is the kind of stuff you will find in the Wallpaper app. Now, obviously, this is a native app for the iPhone and iPad, so it's not like a website that you need to go to and save images to your camera roll. This is a native experience, and you can swipe through wallpapers very nicely. And every time you do, you have all these different styles of wallpaper, but each wallpaper has multiple color variations. And the color variations, I believe, are randomized in code. So you can effectively get an unlimited number of color variations for these different types of wallpapers, which I think is really impressive. And obviously, the wallpapers are optimized for Apple devices. So the iPhone app will save wallpapers that are properly sized for the phone, and the iPad version will do so for the iPad as well. So that's also a nice touch. And you can choose between 3 versions of the same wallpaper as well. So in addition to the color variations, you can also choose light mode, dark mode, and normal mode. These are like 3 different tone shifts to make sure that the wallpaper works well. If you always want to use your device in dark mode, for example, it's going to be darker. And the last thing that I think it's really impressive, which I didn't figure out myself, but which Ryan noticed and wrote about in his review, is how you can, for compatible apps on iPad, you can drag and drop colors from other iPad apps, drop a color into the Wallpaper app, and change a specific color of a wallpaper based on what you just dragged in. So Ryan's example was using Pastel on the iPad, the color utility by Steve John-Smith. You can change wallpapers by dragging in specific colors on iPad, which I think is really, really impressive. And so very few apps on iPad support drag and drop for colors, which is a thing in and of itself. Like, it's a very specific API, and I believe Pastel recently popularized it again. So it's really nice to see that sort of integration in the Wallpaper app. So it's really nicely done. It's a native experience. It's a free download on the App Store. I believe there's in-app purchases to unlock like the full version, but you can try it for free. You can export. I mentioned the iPhone and iPad, but there's also a Mac version with support for up to 5K resolution, which I think is really impressive. Yeah, 15 different styles. If you like the wallpaper, here's what I'm going to say. If you like the wallpapers that you usually see for my home screen or my lock screen on MacStories and Twitter, you should check out this app. That's the kind of wallpapers you will find in here.
Yeah, I like it a lot. And if you long press on that save button, you can save to various different sizes. So you can do watch wallpapers, or you can do the Mac wallpapers right from your iPhone, which is kind of cool. The next story I want to mention is another review from Ryan. Ryan was busy this week. He wrote a review of Crouton, which is a recipe manager and cooking tool. So I've used in the past Paprika, which is an app that I absolutely love on iOS and the iPad. And Crouton is an app in that style, but I will say probably, I think, designed more simply and elegantly than Paprika in a lot of ways, because it strips away a lot of the things that you really don't need, at least that I don't need. I mean, when I use one of these apps, I find a recipe, I get it in the app, and then I make whatever's in there. I mean, it's pretty straightforward. What Crouton does that makes that great is that it uses a very modern design language to break all the steps down into rounded rectangles that make it very easy to visually move from step to step, including there's a cooking mode where while you are in the act of cooking, you can play the recipe back to yourself as a slideshow in effect, where each step will be displayed one at a time, and you can quickly tap on the screen in order to go to the next step. Or it even uses the true depth camera to allow you, if you've got that on your device, to wink at the screen to move from one step to the other, which is kind of cool. I haven't actually tried that yet, but I like that that's an option, especially if you're making something, your hands are all messy and you don't want to touch the screen. The one shortcoming that I would say that I'd like to see added to Crouton is that it does not have a share extension. It doesn't have either a share extension or an action extension that allows you to take things from a browser, a recipe from a browser on a website into the app. You have to copy the URL, and then when you open up Crouton, it will then, offer to import the recipe into the app from there. Not a huge deal, but I do kind of like having the Paprika extension when I'm using that. Crouton also has importing from Paprika if you want to move, your recipes over, which if you have a large collection, that's kind of a nice feature as well. Overall, I haven't used this a ton, but I really like the way it looks, and I'm going to be exploring it some more. I should mention too that it has grocery list support too, so you can take ingredients from the recipes, throw them onto a grocery list, and then sync them with the reminders app, the system reminders app, so that when you go shopping, all that stuff is on there. And you can do things too, like scaling ingredients to fit the number of people you're cooking for, which I know Paprika does that too. And I like that a lot, because a lot of times you'll find a recipe that's for 1 or 2 people, and maybe you're making something for 3 or 4 people. Just super easy to scale it up or down to fit your particular needs.
Yeah, that's very nice. I should also check it out. In some major Apple news this week, Phil Schiller is transitioning to a new and arguably reduced role at Apple. So this came sort of as a shock in the middle of the week, a few days ago. This is a major change to Apple's executive team. So Phil Schiller, who's used to be the senior vice president of worldwide marketing at Apple, better known as the public face of the App Store and as the person who used to, at least a few years ago, introduce the new iPhones, for example, on stage, is transitioning to a new role. As Apple says, is advancing and getting the title of Apple Fellow, which is a very rare title that only a few individuals at Apple hold. Schiller started at Apple in 1987, so I wasn't even born because I was born the following year. And he's been working at Apple for over 30 years, 33 years. And his daily responsibilities will shift to Greg Joswiak, to Jaws, who will get the title, who will become the SVP of marketing at Apple. So pretty shocking transition. Like, I was not expecting this. Like, also just to happen like that in the middle of the week with the press release. It's always surprising, when an Apple executive is, in this case, Schiller is not leaving Apple. Apple says that he will still oversee the App Store and Apple events. However, it's undeniable that his role will be in a much reduced presence. And Joss is going to be the SVP of marketing. So I guess we can expect Joss to introduce the next iPhones and iPads. I was not expecting this. Phil had an incredible career, obviously. Over 3 decades at the same company really is quite the accomplishment when you think about it, and especially a company such as Apple, who's gone through, you can say a bit of a rough patch in the 90s, and then came back as this massive company worth billions and billions of dollars. And Phil was there through the whole process with Steve and then with Tim Cook. So this is, again, quite the surprise, but really when you think about it, Phil really had an incredible career at Apple, and he just turned 60. So hopefully he's going to have more time to focus on his other projects and on his family and just enjoy some time off, I guess.
Yeah, 30 years is a long time with one company, and you're right. Apple has seen an incredible amount of change in those 3 decades. And, it's always kind of bittersweet, these kind of announcements. I really have enjoyed seeing Phil Schiller on stage for all these years that I followed Apple. And, he's not going away. He's still going to be running the App Store and doing some other things at Apple. But I think you're right. I mean, this is kind of his easing out of his central role. And, Greg Joswiak is going to be taking over as the senior vice president of marketing. And, he's an entertaining guy, too. We've seen him on stage. We've seen him on the talk show and other places. But, it's going to be, I'll miss having Phil on stage at WWDC and elsewhere and hearing him on some of the handful of podcasts that he's been on as well. But that was quite a day, really, in news, because earlier in the day, before the announcement about Phil Schiller becoming an Apple Fellow, we got a new iMac. We actually got more than one iMac. We got a few, but the other changes were pretty minor. We got a new 27-inch iMac. And Apple said at WWDC that there would be more Intel Macs coming down the pipeline, and this is it. We've got a brand new 27-inch iMac that has faster processors. It used to have all Fusion drives in this model, and now they're all SSDs, finally. I think that you can still get a Fusion. There's still a Fusion drive option, but standard is SSD. There's also faster AMD Radeon graphics, as well as a nano texture option for the screen, which, if I recall, that's like $1,000 on the Pro Display XDR. But here, it's an inexpensive $500. So, Federico, are you going to get an iMac?
Sure. I'm on the Apple Store website right now as we speak. I was just putting my order.
All right, good. Two. One for you, one for Sylvia, maybe a couple more
not,
for the dogs, right?
Sure. I was thinking about it, actually. No, I mean, honestly, obviously, I don't particularly care about this, but I think it's nice to see, of all things, the nano texture coding option expand to more devices that are not, the super expensive Pro Display XDR. Right. I think it's nice to see that the nano texture may become an option for more devices. By this, I mean, please, Apple, let me give you, the next time you release an iPad Pro, $500 extra for a nano texture iPad Pro. I really want this to be an option on iPad. Even though, I gotta say, maybe that's not possible with touch devices because of that texture. So,
that's true.
Wishful thinking. Maybe someday they'll figure out a way to do this for touch screens as well.
Yeah, there were minor upgrades to the 21.5-inch iMac, very minor, as well as the iMac Pro. The base model is now 10 cores instead of 8, I believe. So those were a couple of tweaks there, just kind of changed those lineups as well. I, too, am not super interested in this machine. I've owned a couple of iMacs in the past. I'm perfectly content with my Mac Mini now. I kind of like that setup, but the nano texture display really caught my eye because it is nice to see it trickle down already to a more affordable machine. And I really still am holding out some hope that someday we'll see like a 5K display that doesn't cost, multiple thousands of dollars that we'll be able to buy one that I'm sure will be expensive, but will, be potentially affordable by more people. And I'm hoping that includes me. So we'll see. Federico, we should mention too that this week on AppStories, we interviewed Guy Rambo. And we talked about all kinds of really great geeky stuff. If you're interested in Mac Catalyst and Swift UI, what that means for all of Apple's platforms in terms of apps coming and that sort of thing, Guy knows more about that than just about anybody we know. And so we sat down with him for our very first interview in the summer series leading up to the fall reviews that we've got that's sponsored by the Concepts app that's available on iPad. And we talked to Guy, and it was a great conversation. So if you haven't listened to that yet, that one's definitely worth checking out. All right, Federico, why don't you start us off and let people know what happened on the club this week?
Sure. So on the club, we did a group story. We got together and we wrote a group article, sort of like a collection, if you wish, of it's not a collection because Ryan had a proper collection in Weekly, which I'll get to in a minute. But we did a story about the sort of widgets that we would like to see in the fall. So we each picked a couple of widgets, me, you, and Ryan. And we wrote about sort of what are the types of experiences that we would like to see on the iPhone home screen and on iPad, by the time iOS and iPadOS 14 are out. And we've been able to test some widgets via test flight, thanks to developers who have been sending us those widgets over the past few weeks. So I think we have a pretty good idea of what's possible and what cannot be done at the moment with widgets. Obviously, interactions inside widgets are not possible. And we've seen some widgets lean very heavily into the idea of, glanceable visualizations of your data, as well as other widgets that are more focused on launching things, because that's the only thing that widgets can do in terms of interactions. They can be launchers for specific actions or views inside apps. So we wrote about the kind of widgets we would like to see in the fall. Ryan did a collection of just a grab bag of iOS utilities. We do this every once in a while. And you can check out the issue of Weekly for all the details. But there's a couple of interesting ones. I know that Lookup, my favorite dictionary app, is in there, as well as Morning Reader, which is one of those news apps that I know Ryan really likes. He's been using this app for a couple of years, I believe. And so check out his explanation as to why he's still using Morning Reader on his iPhone.
Explain yourself, Ryan.
Explain. I know he's got a very particular use case for this one.
I know he does.
Yeah. John, what about the home screen? We have a home screen this week, I think.
Yes, we got a home screen from a reader who's from Austria. That's Walter Wunderlich. And it's a wonderful home screen because it combines both widgets and app icons with wallpapers that really kind of blend the two together in an interesting and creative way. We've been talking to club members about starting to provide us with those home screens for us to look at, because we really wanted to give people some ideas going into the fall of what is possible and what kinds of creative things other people are doing in the club community. And this is a great one to start with because it looks fantastic. And we've got a bunch from other people who have submitted their home screens. So we'll probably be doing at least a few more of those between now and the fall and on into the future. So definitely check that out because I got some good ideas for what I might want to do with mine there as well. All right, Federico, it is time for our Unwind picks to give everybody an idea of things that they might want to do for the weekend. Do you want to kick it off or do you want me to go first?
I want to kick it off by saying that I have basically had no distractions for the past couple of weeks, except for my usual 1 hour of Pokemon play each night. We've been watching no new TV shows, no new movies. I haven't listened to music in a few days, which makes me feel very strange. Like whenever I go without music for a while, I start feeling kind of funny. But I've been just writing and taking notes all day, basically, for the past week. So I'm afraid that my Unwind pick will be very niche and very specific. But because, the only distraction that I've got was Pokemon, I'm going to recommend a website and iPhone and iPad app, because they also have a native component on iOS and iPadOS. It's called Picalytics. So Picalytics is a really excellent resource for anybody who's moderately interested in the world of competitive Pokemon. It's essentially a website that shows you what are the popular Pokemon online, like what are the actual Pokemon that people are using online. These stats are updated every month. They come from a couple of sources, including Nintendo's, the Pokemon Company's official usage data. So they got that. And for each Pokemon, you can see what are the popular moves, what are the popular items. These are like crowdsourced stats that are aggregated on a monthly basis and made available to you. So it's very useful to get a sense of like, what are people actually using this month? Because competitive Pokemon, there are some trends that come and go. And, maybe this month Pikachu is popular again, maybe not. Right. So it's very useful to get a sense of like where the community is going. And on the iOS app is also very useful because you can get all those stats directly on your iPhone and iPad. It's very useful to, for example, if you're playing online and you want to see like, maybe you're not familiar with an opposing Pokemon and you want to see like what's the speed or what is this Pokemon weak to, you can just quickly grab your phone, search, and you'll get that info page right away. So it's really nicely done on the phone as well. Picalytics, a really excellent service. I mean, it goes well beyond the stats. There's a team builder feature on the web. They recently rolled out a Twitch integration. So if you stream your online Pokemon play on Twitch, you can now have a Picalytics plugin that basically allows you to share your team with your listeners, with your people who are watching. Right. I'm used to saying listeners because of podcasting, John. So it's a really cool company. I don't remember the name of the person. I believe it's like a solo project, Picalytics. So it's really, really nicely done. The website is picalytics.com and they have an iPhone and iPad app. So this has been my only distraction, unfortunately. I know that it's quite niche, but it's all that I can recommend this week.
All right, I was just looking at it, and it's got a 4.9 rating on the App Store, and it's only $1. So yeah, I would definitely check that out. I mean, who knows? Maybe you'll end up battling Federico in Pokemon someday. You never know. You got to be ready for that. Everybody should be ready for that. It's like. Be ready for Federico coming at you in Pokemon. All right. Here's my pick. I can't believe I haven't already picked this, but I'm picking the latest album from Phoebe Bridgers, Punisher. Now, I know that you are not a Phoebe Bridgers fan, and I am going to work on you and make you a Phoebe Bridgers fan because I think her music is wonderful, and this album is absolutely fantastic. There are a ton of great songs on here. I know that one of your issues with it is that it's a little bit of a downer sometimes. There are a lot of sad songs, I guess, in Phoebe Bridgers' catalog. Punisher has those. It also has some upbeat tunes like Kyoto, which is one of my favorites. I also like Chinese Satellites an awful lot. That's a fantastic song. I don't know, it's one of those albums. I would say the two albums that I've listened to the most in 2020 so far are that and the Taylor Swift album. They're both really good albums. Phoebe Bridgers, I don't know, she doesn't have, this is only her second album. Her first album was out a couple of years ago, I think, but she's had a lot of side projects and collaborations with other artists as well. So there's other places to listen to her music. But yeah, I don't know. It's one that I find really easy to write to because it's very mellow and calm in a lot of ways. And if you're not listening to the lyrics about people dying and stuff, it's totally good for working to.
Sure.
All right. So did I sell it well enough, Federico? Did I sell it to you?
Yeah, especially the last part.
The last part about writing or the last part about those songs about people dying?
Yeah, that one.
All right. Anyway, I like it a lot, and you should give it another shot because fantastic album.
Okay.
And I highly recommend it to all of our listeners. Okay, Federico, that's it for this week's MacStories Unwind. We'll be back. You can find us all week long over on MacStories.net and, of course, AppStories and all the all the MacStories places that we're typically lurking in. You can also find Federico. He lurks on Twitter and on Instagram pretty regularly. He's at Viticci. That's VITICCI. And I'm at John Voorhees. JOHNVOORHWS. Talk to you next Friday, Federico.
Ciao, John.